It was the early hours of a cold December morning in Kinver, England. Inside a large 5-bedroom home, the noise and chaos of the night before had faded, leaving the place quiet. At the bottom of the staircase, a young mother lay still. Her body showed obvious signs of violence, bruises, cuts, and injuries that made it clear this was more than just a fall. Not long before that, the house had been full of drinking, laughing, and the kind of reckless energy that sometimes comes with a night of partying. Now, it was the scene of a tragedy, and the man who lived there with her, a wealthy property developer worth millions, claimed all he could do was walk away. What started as a celebration ended in heartbreak. Behind closed doors, choices were made that couldn't be undone. This is the story of Natalie Connolly. Let's get into today's case. Natalie grew up in a modest, hardworking family. From early on, she learned what it meant to push through challenges with a mix of resilience, and she had a kind of natural warmth. Friends described her as someone whose laughter filled a room and whose presence made people feel lighter. She remembered small things, listened without judgment, and cared deeply for the people she loved. And at the center of her life was her young daughter. Natalie wasn't just a mom. She was completely devoted. Every dream she had, every step she took was tied to giving her child a better and more secure future. She worked hard to create stability. Even when things felt uncertain, what mattered most was making sure her daughter always felt safe, cared for, and deeply loved. On the other side of the story was John Broadhurst. His life looked nothing like Natalie's. A millionaire property developer with an estimated net worth of around £50 million, he moved through the world with ease and advantage. Expensive suits, high-end cars, large homes, from the outside, it all looked impressive. But behind the surface was a much more complicated man. John had recently ended a long-term relationship with his fiancée, and he did it when she was 8 months pregnant with their second child. The timing raised a lot of questions about him, about loyalty, responsibility, and how he treated the people closest to him. For all his charm, there were always quiet conversations about his impulsiveness and the personal flaws that didn't match the polished image he projected. Natalie met John in the summer of 2016 at the Wagon and Horses pub. For her, that first meeting felt exciting. John carried himself with confidence and his wealth was obvious. Being around him felt like stepping into a completely different world. Their connection was fast and intense, and the relationship took off almost immediately. What started as secret meetups quickly turned into something bigger. Natalie let go of her old routines and eventually moved in with him. They settled into a 5-bedroom rental in Kinver, a house that felt like a mansion to her, unlike anything she'd ever lived in before. It was a lifestyle she had only seen in movies or magazines, and John didn't shy away from highlighting the difference. He showered her with expensive gifts, a brand new BMW, spending money, and talk of luxury trips. They even made plans to spend Christmas in Dubai, the kind of holiday that promised warmth, comfort, and escape. From the outside, everything looked picture perfect. Friends saw the photos of fancy dinners, trips, and designer clothes. To the world, they looked like a glamorous couple living an enviable life. But underneath that shiny exterior, things weren't as smooth. Their relationship ran on intensity, and that intensity often tipped into something unhealthy. Nights were filled with heavy drinking, and recreational drugs. The line between fun and going too far faded, and the risks they took became more and more worrying. Natalie's family started noticing changes too. They saw bruises and marks on her body, but when they asked, she brushed it off and said it was nothing. She insisted she was fine and that it was just part of their relationship. Still, behind her reassurances was a quiet discomfort, something she didn't know how to explain or wasn't ready to. Some people close to Natalie worried that what she called consensual might have been something more complicated, maybe even something she didn't fully understand how to talk about. But Natalie continued to defend John. She told friends he was her future, and that for the first time in years, she felt like she had found the love and stability she'd been searching for. December 17, 2016 started out like any normal day for Natalie Connolly and John Broadhurst. They spent the afternoon at a football match, blending into the crowd of fans who filled the stadium. From the outside, they looked relaxed and happy, enjoying the energy of the game and the company of their friends. Nothing about those early hours suggested how the day would end. They watched from a VIP box, where the drinks kept coming and the atmosphere was lively. People who were with them later described the couple as affectionate and light-hearted, almost like two people still in the early exciting stages of a relationship. They laughed with each other, leaned in close, and seemed completely wrapped up in their own world. After the match, the night kept going. With friends still around, they headed to a local curry house. They shared plates of food, toasted to the evening, and filled the room with conversation and laughter. For a while, it was just a group enjoying a normal Saturday night out. When the evening came to an end, their chauffeur waited outside to take Natalie and John back to the 5-bedroom house in Kinver that had come to represent their life together. To anyone watching, it probably looked like the perfect ending to a fun, carefree night. But once the front door closed behind them, the tone shifted. The house grew quiet, the guests were gone, and the evening didn't wind down the way it should have. They kept drinking, added cocaine into the mix, and the combination blurred their judgment and sense of control. What had started as a fun, fast-moving night slowly tipped into something much more dangerous. Their drinking and drug use kept escalating, and their intimacy followed the same pattern. What began as consensual and playful shifted into something rougher, pushed along by the alcohol and cocaine. At some point, the line between excitement and real harm wasn't just blurred, it was crossed, and the consequences were devastating. By the time the night was over, Natalie had more than 40 injuries. Some were obvious. Bruises, cuts, marks that showed she'd been hurt. Others were internal, serious wounds that caused major bleeding inside her body, the kind of injuries that could have been treated if someone had gotten help quickly. But help never came. John Broadhurst later said he couldn't lift her, that he wasn't able to get her upstairs. Instead, he left her at the bottom of the staircase, badly injured and alone. He had the money, the ability, and plenty of chances to call for medical help. But he didn't. He simply walked away. He went to bed upstairs. Natalie remained on the floor downstairs, still bleeding, still in pain, and completely on her own. The woman who had once brought so much joy and warmth to the people around her spent her final hours without anyone there to help her. By the morning of December 18th, The damage was far beyond anything that could be undone. At 9:25 a.m., John finally called emergency services. When paramedics entered the house in Kinver, they found Natalie at the bottom of the stairs. Unresponsive and already cold. Her injuries were immediately visible: cuts, bruises, and clear signs of trauma. Later examinations counted more than 40 wounds in total. What they couldn't see right away was even more severe: extensive internal bleeding that had continued through the night. Toxicology reports later added another piece to the picture. Natalie's blood alcohol level was almost 4 times the legal driving limit, showing how intoxicated she had been. Combined with the injuries she suffered, her body simply couldn't survive without urgent medical treatment. Treatment she never received. For Natalie's family, the knowledge that she might have lived if help had been called in time only deepened the heartbreak. The news hit Natalie's family with a kind of pain that's hard to put into words. The woman they loved, bright, caring, full of energy, and completely devoted to her daughter, was suddenly gone, and the circumstances were almost impossible to process. Outside the family, the case quickly drew public attention. People were shocked and angry. Many couldn't understand how someone with John's resources and access to help had done nothing. Why hadn't he called for assistance sooner? Why had he walked away at a moment when Natalie might still have been saved? From the moment first responders entered the house, it was obvious this wasn't an accident. The combination of heavy drinking, drug use, and her untreated injuries had created a situation that was far more serious than John ever acknowledged. The signs of harm and neglect stood out immediately. Investigators began working through what had happened the night before. Every detail mattered: the injuries Natalie had, the timeline of events, and the choices John made. Each step he didn't take, each moment he failed to help her, became part of the puzzle they needed to solve. It didn't take long for the investigation to confirm what many already suspected. Natalie's injuries weren't from a single fall or a brief incident. They were the result of prolonged, dangerous behavior intensified by alcohol and drugs. The autopsy made that clear, showing both the physical trauma she had suffered and how far things had spiraled out of control. As police dug deeper, more concerning information about the couple's relationship surfaced. Behind the photos of holidays, cars, and nights out was a pattern of chaos. Heavy drinking, drug use, and risky behavior that kept escalating. For investigators and prosecutors, attention centered on one undeniable fact: John Broadhurst knew how badly Natalie was hurt. He admitted he saw her injuries. He admitted he understood she was in a vulnerable state. And still, he left her at the bottom of the stairs and went upstairs to bed. That decision, the choice to walk away instead of calling for help, became the foundation of the case against him. Investigators determined that his failure to act didn't just contribute to what happened. It played a direct role in Natalie's death. In the weeks that followed, the case moved forward. John Broadhurst was formally charged with manslaughter through gross negligence. Prosecutors argued that as Natalie's partner, John had a clear responsibility to look out for her, especially when she wasn't able to look out for herself. Instead, they said he walked away at a moment when she needed someone the most. When the case went to court, Broadhurst pleaded guilty to manslaughter. By doing that, he acknowledged that his decision to leave Natalie at the bottom of the stairs knowing the state she was in directly contributed to her death. It wasn't an admission of intentional harm, but of a level of neglect that had devastating consequences. The court accepted his plea, agreeing that his actions showed negligence rather than deliberate violence. In December 2018, he was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months in prison. The response was immediate. Many people felt the sentence was far too light. They struggled to understand how such a short prison term could reflect the loss of a woman who had been so deeply loved. To Natalie's family, it felt like being hurt all over again, first by John and then by the outcome of the case. In the courtroom, her family listened to every detail of what had happened. Her mother, sister, and brother sat together through the proceedings, their grief visible in every hearing. In their statements, they described Natalie as warm, funny, and deeply devoted to her young daughter. They talked about her bright personality and how much she still had ahead of her. Her twin sister shared how losing Natalie felt like losing part of herself. A connection that had been there from birth suddenly gone. The sentencing brought the legal process to an end, but it didn't bring closure. For her family, the pain of that night and of the choices that led to it remains. Natalie had trusted John, and her family had trusted that he would take care of her. Instead, they were left with the reality that she spent her final moments alone. Her mother later spoke publicly about how difficult it was to accept. She said the family believed John would protect Natalie, not leave her when she needed help the most. That sense of betrayal stayed with Natalie's family. It added another layer of pain to grief that was already overwhelming. What made it even harder was the feeling that the sentence didn't match the seriousness of what had happened. To them, it didn't reflect the weight of John's choices or the value of Natalie's life. As the case gained attention, people across the country echoed the family's frustration. Many questioned how someone could see another person in such a vulnerable, dangerous state and still decide not to step in. The combination of Natalie's injuries and Broders's decision to walk away painted a troubling picture of neglect. It also sparked wider conversations about privilege and the justice system. Broadhurst lived comfortably with access to resources and advantages that most people don't have. Yet he received only a few years in prison for a series of decisions that ended in tragedy. It led many to wonder whether the outcome would have been different if the situation had involved someone without his wealth or social standing. Another difficult part of this story is how easily destructive behavior can start to feel normal. What begins as excitement or pushing limits can slowly shift into something much riskier. In Natalie's life, the mix of heavy drinking, drugs, and increasingly dangerous behavior created an environment where safety took a back seat and eventually disappeared altogether. It's a reminder of how quickly those patterns can spiral. Natalie Connolly's death isn't just about one night. It's about choices, responsibility, and the consequences that follow when someone fails to act. Her story pushes us to think about how we protect the people we care about and how important it is to speak up when something feels off. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you feel justice was done, or do you think the consequences should have been more severe?